The wind howled through the barren cornstalks, the dying remnants of the autumn harvest swaying like brittle skeletons. The ground was hard beneath my boots, cracked from the long summer heat, but the chill in the air promised winter wasn't far behind. The village had been preparing for the harvest festival, just as it had every year since anyone could remember. The fields surrounding us, our livelihood, our pride, had always been protected by a single figure, the Scarecrow. Every fall, the elders would gather in the square, each villager handing over a small token of themselves, a threadbare scarf, a tattered shirt, even a child's sock, offering something to make the Scarecrow whole. Legend said the Scarecrow's power was in the fragments of our lives stitched into its form. Each year, it stood tall in the center of the field, lifeless, its stitched eyes watching over the crops, guarding the town from whatever lurked in the dark. It was our protector. But this year, everything was different. The festival had been postponed. No one spoke of the reason aloud, but we all knew. People didn't care about the old ways anymore. It was easier to dismiss the rituals as quaint superstition, nothing more than the ghost stories told to children to keep them inside at night. This year, the Scarecrow had been put up without the offering. No tokens, no piece of clothing, just straw and burlap. I remember the night it happened. I was out late, much later than usual, walking the fields when the wind picked up, sharper than usual. The corn whispered as if something moved between the stalks. The sky, thick with clouds, hid the moon, and everything felt wrong. And that's when I saw it. The Scarecrow stood in the middle of the field, its head lolling unnaturally to one side. It was wrong. Something about it was just wrong. Maybe it was the way its tattered clothes hung too loose, or the fact that its arm looked twisted, bending backward in a way human limbs never should. But the thing that caught my eye, the thing that froze my blood in my veins, was its face. The burlap sack stitched into that crude mockery of a human head had changed. Its eyes, they weren't stitched shut anymore. They were open, wide, and they glistened in the moonlight watching. I stood there, my breath frozen in my throat, every instinct telling me to run, but I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the earth as if the ground beneath me had come alive and held me in place. I watched helpless as the Scarecrow slowly began to turn its head. The creak of straw and old wood filled the air, the sound grating against my skull. Its neck twisted with an agonizing slowness until it faced me. The corn swayed violently now, though the wind had died down, and then it smiled. God, that smile! Stitched across its face, the threads pulling tight, splitting the fabric of the burlap, revealing something underneath. Something dark, something red. I stumbled backward, my legs finally obeying, but I knew it had seen me. Its eyes followed my every movement. As I turned to run, the scream of rustling corn echoed behind me, growing louder, faster. The Scarecrow was moving. I ran through the fields, my heart hammering in my chest, ears straining to hear if it was gaining on me. The sound of heavy footsteps, like boots crunching on the dried earth, pounded from behind. But when I looked back, nothing. Just the empty rows of corn. I must have imagined it, I told myself, forcing my breathing to slow. It couldn't have moved. It was just a scarecrow. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I made it back to the village, the streets quiet, houses dark. I considered pounding on someone's door, telling them what I saw, but who would believe me? They'd laugh, shake their heads, tell me it was the festival getting to me, or worse, that I was losing it. But when morning came, I learned I wasn't the only one who had seen it. Old Man Cartwright was found dead in his barn, his body mutilated, twisted in ways no human body should be. Limbs snapped, face locked in an expression of pure terror. They said it looked like something had ripped him apart. His clothes were missing. Just his skin and bone left, like the stuffing had been torn out of him. And that's when the whispers began. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the Scarecrow, about the broken tradition. How the Scarecrow hadn't been properly made this year. How we had failed to offer it our pieces, and now it was angry. But no one wanted to believe. It was just a story, they said, a tale to scare kids. Until more bodies showed up, the fields were silent now, the corn no longer whispering in the wind. But there was something out there. Something watching, waiting, I could feel it, and last night I saw it again. The Scarecrow. It was closer this time, standing at the edge of the field, just beyond the tree line near my house. Its eyes were fixed on me, and it was smiling. Tomorrow, they said, we'd burn the Scarecrow, end the curse, stop whatever was happening. But as I sit here staring out my window, I know one thing for sure. It's too late. The Scarecrow has already come to life, and it's coming for me next. The night was still, unnaturally quiet. Not even the crickets dared to chirp. The only sound was the rapid thud of my heart, pulsing in my ears like a drum. I sat in the dark, huddled by the window, watching the cornfield, watching it. The scarecrow hadn't moved since last night, at least not that I could see, but its presence was palpable, like a weight pressing down on my chest. It stood there, twisted and unnatural, staring at me with those wide, glistening eyes, that grotesque smile stretched too far across its burlap face. I knew it was waiting for the right moment. They told me the villagers were gathering in the morning, that they would burn it, tear it down to ashes, that it would all be over. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew the old ways had been broken, and there was no stopping it now. The harvest keeper had come for its payment, and it wouldn't stop until it had us all. A low groan filled the air, and my heart skipped a beat. I scanned the field, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, the moon casting just enough light to make every stalk of corn look like something lurking in the dark. Then I heard it. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crunching on the dry earth, drawing closer. I held my breath, my body frozen, and for a split second I thought it was in my head again, just like before. But this time, it wasn't my imagination. The front door creaked open, the sound echoing through the silence like a gunshot. Slow, purposeful, my stomach turned to ice. The air felt thick, suffocating as I gripped the handle of the kitchen knife I'd grabbed earlier, my knuckles white. Then the footsteps were inside the house. It's here. The sound of straw shifting, that horrible, dry rustling, filled the hallway. I forced myself to my feet, each step heavier than the last, and moved toward the front of the house, knife in hand. The door hung open on its hinges, swinging in the cold breeze, but there was nothing outside, nothing in the doorway. But I wasn't alone. A shuffling came from the corner of the room, and my eyes locked onto it. Slowly I turned, every muscle tensed. And that's when I saw it. The scarecrow stood in the shadows of my living room, hunched over, straw poking out from its torn clothing, the twisted, mutilated figure of something that had never been alive in the first place. Its arms hung unnaturally, too long for its body, fingers outstretched like claws. And it was smiling at me, that stitched, sickening grin torn open, exposing something underneath. But this time there was more. I felt my stomach lurch as I saw it, fragments of fabric clinging to its body. Not just any fabric, pieces of clothes I recognized. Cartwright's shirt, the same fabric old man Cartwright had been wearing the night he died. But it wasn't just him. Other scraps, torn and stained, dangled from the scarecrow's limbs, bits of clothing from every single victim. It wasn't just a scarecrow. It was made of us. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, but before I could move, it lunged forward, its speed inhuman. I barely had time to swing the knife before it knocked me to the ground, the blade flying from my hand. The air left my lungs in a gasp, and the room spun as I hit the floor hard, scrambling backward, desperate to escape. The scarecrow loomed over me, its eyes gleaming, alive with something ancient, something hungry. Straw fingers stretched toward me, grasping, but I kicked out, the instinct to survive overpowering my terror. My foot connected, and for a moment it faltered, giving me just enough time to push myself up and run. But as I reached the door, I stopped cold, a scream froze in my throat. Standing in the doorway was Cartwright, or what was left of him. His body torn and twisted, skin hanging loose, flesh barely clinging to bone, staggered toward me, his dead eyes locked on mine, mouth moving in a grotesque mockery of speech, though no words came out. Behind him, the others, the villagers, mangled and torn, shuffled into view, their faces frozen in that same silent scream of terror. I realized then, with sickening clarity, what had happened. The scarecrow had taken them, piece by piece, their bodies, their souls, stitched into its twisted form, and now it had come for me. But it wasn't just a harvest, it was building something. As I turned, I felt a sharp pain shoot through my leg, something cold wrapping around my ankle. I looked down and screamed. The scarecrow's hand, made of bone and straw, had latched onto me, pulling me toward it. I kicked and clawed at the ground, but its grip was like iron. The others closed in around me, their eyes hollow, their faces twisted in torment, arms outstretched. They were the harvest keeper's offerings, and I was next. I struggled, clawing at the ground, but the scarecrow dragged me closer, its grin growing wider, impossibly wide, until its face split open. Inside, beyond the straw and burlap, something writhed, something alive, and then I heard the voice. Low, guttural, coming from inside the thing. "You broke the pact," it whispered, each word like nails on a chalkboard. "Now you belong to me." With a sickening tear, the scarecrow's mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged, blood-stained teeth. Teeth made of bone, the bones of those it had already claimed. I felt my skin crawl, my mind on the verge of breaking as it pulled me closer, the others watching, unable to help. And just as the scarecrow closed in around me, I realized the truth. It was never the scarecrow that protected us. It was keeping us for itself, and now I was part of it, forever.